www.mympo.org. Look at it. It is really cool. Everything is there. All these maps, all the charts, all the agreements, the old bridge study, the old water taxi study, it's all there.
And the Cona website has a whole section on the MPO and links to all of these things. Who has the first question? Everybody learned everything. Okay.
I'd like to make a comment to Mr. Bennett that perhaps the planners, the MPO should be more mindful of that adage, which came first, the chicken or the egg? And that when they were planning all this building, Benderson, Lakewood Ranch, I'm mentioning what you mentioned, Mr. Bennett, who said it's not their fault, it's money. If they were mindful that if you're going to build all this, wouldn't it make common sense you were going to need roads?
That's hindsight. Hindsight is always more effective than foresight, but there were serious disagreements on what to do, besides no money.
My question is on the, you were talking about the turnarounds, and you made the comment that you thought they slowed traffic. I'd like to know why you think they slow down traffic.
Roundabouts?
Yes.
What's the guy's name? Do you remember the Australian?
His name is Michael Walwork.
It is part of his presentation that a well-designed roundabout is a traffic calming device. And I think everybody who goes through a roundabout knows they have to slow down. So it's been sold that way, and I happen to concur. And I'm not a roundabout fan, but I'll tell you it slows traffic down.
Well, I am a roundabout fan, and usually the traffic is slowed to around 17 miles an hour in order for traffic to flow. And the volume of traffic that can go through an intersection at that speed is much greater than any other speed, for instance, like 45 miles an hour, because as you're going more slowly, the automobiles can be closer together and there can be a continuous flow. And roundabouts are considered a continuous flow intersection. That's why they work. And just because you're going more slowly doesn't mean you can't get there in less time. That's why, and the most important, there are several things that are most important about roundabouts. No left-hand turns, which is where the majority of people are killed at intersections. There are always fewer automobile accident deaths with roundabouts. There may be more accidents, but they're oblique, and even insurance companies support them because there is less damage to the vehicles and to the people.
I might add, roundabouts are probably the subject of a meeting of its own. And there's still quite a bit of controversy over them. I think what you will see over the next probably 10 years is that some of the roundabouts will have to be changed because they're too big or too small, and that some won't work because of the traffic flow. The best example of change in that respect is the roundabout at the end of and Clearwater that goes out to the beach. I can't remember the name, but it was one of the first in the area. And that has now traffic lights at every entrance and exit because the volume is too great. You can't get into the roundabout. And I have found that in Europe, in England, and Scotland. Other people go in other parts of Europe and they don't have that problem, and that's likely due to traffic flow. But it's something that has to work out because in a number of places they're working great. I'll just take the new one at Orange in Maine. That is gorgeous. That's a piece of art. And so when you get something like that, and the one in 5 Points is nice. So they're roundabouts, and they're traffic circles for people like me from New Jersey. They're in Massachusetts.
I've got another question, Art.
Yes.
I'm also a firm believer in the roundabouts. There is one I would like to discuss though. It's on Honore and Weber.
I think that's too small myself.
I hate going near that thing. If I can miss it, I do. You got the yard people with their trailers and their trucks. They come across Weber and they don't care if you're in it or not. They're going by it.
That is the second highest roundabout accident location next to Jacaranda and Venice Avenue. And that, I think, because I go through there all the time, is probably too small. And that eventually can get remedies. We'll have to see.
I want to address your point of the hindsight and foresight, because Cona, at the time that the hearings were held on the vendors of the mall and all of that, Cona spoke at the hearings, and much of what we addressed was the issue of the fact that the traffic, the transportation network was not planned to adequately handle what would be there. So we had 2020 foresight. It was ignored by the commissioners, who then went ahead and granted the comp plan and rezone changes and all those things to allow it, because it was perfectly evident that it was going to be a disaster traffic-wise, and it is.
Well, let me take a second, really, I spoke longer than I wanted to, about planning at the MPO level. What these documents that I refer to represent is input from a number of sources, including proposals by our planning consultants. But we do not make planning policy for anybody. We just try to put down what the information flow we get is, to show how it's going to look, and then we have back and forth on, well, you don't want that there because it's going to go right through a development, and so forth. So our planning is a little different from county planning and municipal planning. And in fairness to the subjects of criticism, the MPO, and that's all I'm talking about now, had plans that were being developed to deal with most of the issues that you're talking about, including new bus routes, which are being put into effect, better lighting, which is still being argued about, and certain intersection improvements. The problem that we face, besides not having money, let's assume we get money right away, is our planning was not soon enough for what actually happened. And nobody saw that the Benderson development and the Lakewood Ranch development would get bigger so fast. So we had the plans in place, but our timing was off. And we had a particular problem because we didn't like the diverging timing. Didn't make sense to us. That got changed by a very good redo of the presentation.
Hi, Mr. Bennett.
That's John.
I mentioned before your talk that 25 years ago, the long-range transportation plan for the MPO had an Amtrak stop at Fruitville and I-75 and Jacaranda and I-75. Clearly, a budget shortfall. We have had comp plans since the 70s and lots of planning discussion prior. And the linkage between land use, transportation, actually water first, land use second, transportation third, has been discussed now by generations. And yet we see the failure of these plans, one project at a time, one new idea at a time, one new set of elected officials at a time. And it's like, there's no fault, but there's no continuity. There's no public love for this process anymore. And there was. And my question to you is, how do you bring public love back into this thing about the future we could have, instead of the future we're getting, which is one bite at a time?
I will stay away from politics.
No politics. I'm talking about love here. And there is a question. How would you finance the shortfall if people were really in love with the solution that you were trying to raise money for?
All right. First of all, as we talked earlier, Roxana will, I think, confirm this. There is still in I-75 right-of-way planning for rail. Not necessarily Amtrak, but certainly light rail. Secondly, we all know the story of the high-speed rail from Orlando to Tampa. That didn't happen. So what do you do if you have a need that there is no money for and no interest has been organized? That's your question. The first thing you do is you organize the interest. You get the people together. Lakewood Ranch did that. The Meadows did that for university. You get the people speaking. You come to MPO and you say, look, why don't you do this? You get enough people at the next level who have people they know at the next level interested, things will happen. But you have to start right on the ground with the people who are concerned and get organized.
I'm going to let Roxanne.
Don't take your guns to federal wildlife land, but come to meetings and speak well.
I'm going to let Roxanne address the issue that you brought up.
About how you get people interested in, well, I think you hit it on the head. It's, you got to get them interested, sell it to them. Sell the idea of why you need for the future of development, for the future for not only yourself but for your children. It just comes right down to selling the reason why, and not just to make it pretty, but tell them this is why we need this. There's nowhere to grow. You can't keep expanding. You got to fix what you already have.
Right.
And that's where it comes down to, is just fixing what you have. Because there's plenty of things you could do, different modes of transportation, get people out.
Thank you.
Sir, would you step behind?
Oh, you? Thank you. He just doesn't want to look at the banner all the time.
Thank you for your presentation. I have been in Sarasota only a year and a half, and I avoid places like Lakewood Ranch and University and whatever, but I do spend a lot of time in the city of Sarasota, and I am sort of unbelieving what is happening in the city in terms of the development that I see going on. I went to a presentation a couple months ago that was put on by a couple of planners with the city, and they did a PowerPoint presentation of all the new buildings and other developments that were that had been approved and were going to be going up in the next several years, and it was something like 28 projects. And there was no mention whatsoever of transportation in that presentation. And I'm wondering what you think can be done here in the city of Sarasota to create better transportation options when all this development is going on without apparently any attention being paid to that issue?
Well, I'm in the sticks in Venice. I'm not in Sarasota, so I don't have necessarily many answers for Sarasota. I do know that there has been considerable surface transportation planning, that is road widening, roundabouts, traffic slowing, reconstruction of interchanges, and there's a list of stuff in these papers. One of the things I would suggest as an example, trying to get to a breakfast meeting at the Sarasota Yacht Club coming off of Fruitville Road, that the people who are constructing the view do not close off the turn lane until after 10 o'clock. It was closed at 7:30. And you can't get over the bridge. You cannot, all the traffic squeezes down to 2 lanes for everything where the view is being constructed. That is not a planning issue. That is communication between the contractor and City Hall, not the commission, but the building department, that kind of thing. So nobody knows about that until I say, hey, look, don't close it until 10 o'clock. So there are a whole lot of things like that that people need to bring up that will help. But I know there's surface transportation planning in place. Buses, Uber, well, Uber's not regulated now, so that's probably part of the help. Other than that, officials here can't speak to that because this is not a public meeting.
I can discuss one aspect. Our zoning limits of development were chosen in the city of Sarasota in the 1970s, and they allow such density that's what you're seeing. For instance, they allow buildings up to 18 stories. And for the city to take that away from the people that own that property would put them in liability. So we've sort of crossed a threshold that's not possible to return. The only thing you can do is trying to adapt the road designs and the facilities around it. That's the quick answer to that.
I'd like to add to that. I'm a lawyer. I'm not a Florida lawyer. I don't intend upon being a Florida lawyer. But Florida law in this area is a total mess. It's a complete disaster.
What do you mean?
Well, as you just heard, an old law has not been changed, and a person who owns the property has a right to stand on it, even if it causes problems. And in a lot of states, if you create a nuisance, you can't do it. Try that one in Florida, it won't work. The law is not in favor of you. And it needs to be. And that means you need to communicate with your legislators, and that's another meeting. So is the law in Florida, that's another meeting. But it's not good.
I was to a meeting a few years ago when the Cornerstone Prison.
Please, we need you on the microphone. We're doing filming. I have another question here first. Okay.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. I'm Alex Coe. And, you know, I think a lot of people feel this issue of traffic is a serious issue. I mean, for myself personally, I live very close to Fruitville Road. As soon as it's season, what I hear is ambulances, Bay Flight, and the fire department all season long. And that is a direct response to the danger on our roads. And when we all heard you say time and time again, there's no money, there's no money. Development has an impact. They bring more people, who bring more cars, who bring traffic. That's why there used to be a thing called impact fees. And those things were allocated for the expenses of development. And so if we had people in office who understood that, your job would be easier and our roads would be safer. And so many of the things that you mentioned are just such a mess. Like when you said the bridge isn't big enough, I disagree. The problem is the area of downtown right there before the bridge. It's always been congested. Before they put the Ritz in, before they built the View, I can't even imagine what it's going to be like after they put the View in there. Siesta Key. Why in the world did we just spend all this money to build a big parking lot so more cars can go to the islands? We should be having less cars go to the islands. We should be finding ways to transport people from the mainland to the beaches. There's so many opportunities to move people around. And I've been in this community for 20 years. I've attended the SCAT meetings. I've gone to all kinds of mobility things. It just seems like nobody is paying attention to a very simple fact. Where are people going and how do we get there? So I'm curious, what are the things that could happen in this county that would make your job and the people that work with you, what would make your job easier so that at the end of the day, you guys could all look at each other and go, wow, look at this amazing transportation system we created in Sarasota County?
The only comment I can make is I agree with just about everything you've said, particularly impact fees. I have no responsibility for that. In fact, right now I have no responsibility for anything, which is why I didn't run again for office. That doesn't mean I'm not interested. Mr. Hutchinson could give you it's on there somewhere, my set of suggestions about a water taxi for St. Armand's, because I think that has a lot of potential for people who want to shop and eat there. And the last water taxi study that was done had a lot of flaws in it, and I had pointed those out. So yes, there should be more alternative means of doing things, and I think that the study that FDOT is going to develop for the islands is going to come up with some of those. It's a slow process, and it doesn't happen overnight, and that's because there are people that disagree with you, and there are people that disagree with me, and we have to figure out how to work those disagreements out so that something can happen.
Terry, and then Dave.
I was just going to comment. I believe you said that there were problems with that roundabout or whatever it's called up in Clearwater.
It's the roundabout at the end of whatever the main drag.
Well, there was a presentation given by some group 2 or 3 years ago, 5 years ago, about roundabouts. And one of the keystone